I want to welcome everybody in for actually something we haven't done for a while, and that's an on-location presentation of the games people play. We are actually someplace very near and dear to our guest, as a matter of fact, today. We are in Mansfield, Massachusetts, and we are at one of my favorite places. I've been here now on, my third trip in here, and I've really grown to love it. The chowder, the rest of the menu. We are at Gino's, long-standing establishment here, one of the pillars of the Mansfield community since 1981, and here courtesy of the owner, John Spizo. We want to give John all the credit for having us here, and also welcoming in our guest this week. And our guest was the face of the New England Patriots franchise, an iconic figure in New England sports, a quarterback of the New England Patriots from 1975 to 1990, and certainly no stranger to where we currently reside in Mansfield here on North Main Street, because would probably be, I'd say, a Steve Grogan throw over the middle to Stanley Morgan would probably connect us with Grogan Marciano Sporting Goods, and I am sporting my Grogan Marciano Sporting Goods T-shirt that I just received courtesy of his son Tyler Grogan. And Steve, we always try to make the guests feel at home. I have my Pat Patriot vintage 1960, yes, vintage 1960 hat on from the beginning of the AFL. And of all the guests that we've had so far in the games people play, this is about as home as we can make it. But you are actually in Kansas right now, where you spend a good deal of your time in retirement. But you're certainly here in spirit in Mansfield, just down the street from the business that you've had for, about a quarter century?
Yeah, a little over that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, with your son Tyler, once again, who played football at Northeastern University. Remember him when I was calling the Harvard games, and Harvard playing against Northeastern, and just had a chance to visit with him earlier. But
Gino's has the best soup in town, that's for sure.
Absolutely, as advertised.
I'd miss getting some of that occasionally.
We'll see what we could do. I wish we could do a quick takeout for you here today. I just had a bowl of chowder to start with.
There you go.
Great soup, great chowder. I'm a big chowder aficionado and chowder connoisseur, and I'll rate them with anybody. I'll rate them the absolute best of the best, the pinnacle of chowder here. And
yep.
We take, as you know, as a long-adopted New Englander, we take our chowder seriously, don't we, Steve?
You do. And unfortunately, I can't eat it because I'm allergic to seafood.
Oh, okay. Okay. You
were
down
all those years in the Boston area with all that great seafood, and I never could eat it.
Never could eat it. I'm sorry to hear that. I love the seafood, but once again, the soups are award-winning here at Gino's, as we pointed out. So we are here in Mansfield, and once again, thank you to John Spizo from the Gino's establishment where we're doing our program today. Steve Grogan, once again, 16 years, very much personifies once a Patriot, always a Patriot, member of the Patriot Hall of Fame, part of their 25th anniversary team, and certainly exhibited everything about toughness, leadership, and his ability at quarterback in leading the New England Patriots over the course of his long career at that position here in New England, his adopted home. As we always do, Steve, we go back and give an opportunity to get some background for our guests and what their roots are and where they came from, where they started. In your case, you were actually born San Antonio, Texas, and grew up in Ottawa, Kansas, which I guess would you describe that as a small college town, if you will, with Ottawa University just a couple of blocks from where you were born or where you lived?
My dad was in the Air Force during the Korean conflict. That's where I was born, in San Antonio, and then spent about 6 or 8 months there. And they moved back to Kansas, and Dad went back to school at Ottawa University. And I grew up around Ottawa University. I went to all the football and basketball games, went to track meets. It was only 2 blocks from the house. And, about 10,000 population in Ottawa, so it was decent size. We were about an hour southwest of Kansas City, and just a great place to grow up.
You're both your mom and dad alums, I believe, of Ottawa. Both went to school
Correct.
there, right in your neighborhood, and that gave you an opportunity with the facilities at Ottawa My research tells me you used to occasionally be able to sneak in the gym and be able to shoot around a little bit over there on the Ottawa campus.
We climbed through some windows occasionally to get into the gym, and if the door was unlocked, we just went in through the door and started playing on the side. And they had intramurals on Saturdays, and we'd shoot at one end while the game was going at the other end. And they'd get mad at us occasionally, but we kept going back.
Indeed, you guys. When it's in the blood, it's in the blood. And with you and athletics, obviously, from a very early age, and then attending Ottawa High School, where you enjoyed success, actually multiple sports success, Steve, with track, basketball, and football. Three sports that you excelled at, with a strong core of fellow athletes that you had in your group in all three sports.
Yeah, there was a group of us that were all the same age that just loved sports, and we were all pretty good athletes. I was not necessarily the best athlete of the group, but we had 5 or 6 of us that just loved to play basketball. We loved to play football. We all ran track, did those kind of things. It was a great bunch of guys, and we started in the 7th grade together, went all the way through high school, and we had some pretty good success our junior and senior years.
Indeed, the track state championship in 1970, basketball in 1971, and in football, you climbed all the way to the 3A state championship game, runner-up that year, but certainly a special year, really a storybook career in high school for you if you think back to it.
Yeah, it was just a great time. I don't think we realized how special it was until later, but we won the basketball championship. The football championship, I dislocated my elbow, scoring a touchdown early in the second, I guess it was toward the end of the half, and was out for the rest of the game. We lost by, I think it was 8 points in that game. And then the track titles were a combination of a lot of people coming together and getting the job done there. So there aren't too many classes in high school that can say that they've been to the state championships and won a number of them like we had.
Indeed. And your background at home, you mentioned your dad in the military, but your dad also, you had that benefit. And, boy, it's remarkable to me how many times that I run into this in the course of getting to know guys and researching and interviews, teacher-coach background for guys that become successful athletes, and you're in that category.
Yeah, my dad, initially when he got out of college there at Ottawa University, he purchased a service station in downtown Ottawa and ran that for a number of years. He played town league softball, church league softball, town team basketball, town team, church league basketball. He was always in a gym, and I was always tagging along with my brother. And my mom was a very good athlete. She would go out in the front yard and punt footballs to us and play catch with us. And so it was a very athletic family. And then my dad, as I became just before I became a junior high student, he decided that he wanted to be a teacher and a coach, which is what he'd gone to college for. That was about the time in the 70s where the gas prices went from 20 cents a gallon to $1 a gallon, and there were lines for gas and tough way to make a living. So he got his degree, went back and taught and coached for the rest of his career, either at junior high, and then he coached at Ottawa University, the football team, while he was teaching at the high school.
And as far as the recruiting process for you, you ended up migrating roughly 100 miles down to Manhattan, Kansas, to Kansas State. What was that experience like for you in terms of being recruited as obviously a three-sport, a guy that had an impact as a three-sport athlete in high school and had such great success?
Yeah, I don't think I really knew. I know I didn't know that I was as good as some people thought I was in high school. After my first game in football my senior year, I got a phone call from a coach in Colorado, at University of Colorado. And when the phone conversation ended, I walked into the kitchen and my dad said, said, you're going to get a lot of calls like that. Don't let it go to your head. And I really didn't know what he meant because I had always planned. My plan was to go to Ottawa University and play 3 sports like I did in high school. And I wasn't sure I was good enough to play in the big time. And then I had an uncle that played freshman year at Kansas State and then transferred to Ottawa University. And he talked to me one day and he said, you can always be a big fish in a little pond, or you can maybe be a big fish in a big pond. Why don't you go try it at K-State? If you don't like it, you can come back home. And so that's what I did. And things just kept getting better and better for me at K-State. And I wound up staying there, and we were not good. It was a struggle to recruit to Manhattan, Kansas. Bill Snyder's done a great job. That's the late 80s, but
amazing.
Back when I was there, we won. We went 3-8, 5-6, 4-7. So we didn't have a lot of success, and I still don't understand why the Patriots decided to take a chance on me, but they did, and things worked out there. So I've had a lot of good fortune throughout my life for things. I remember as a freshman, we had a scrimmage against the varsity. My folks came up from Ottawa, and I just had the heck beat out of me. Those upperclassmen were just, we couldn't block them. They were knocking me down and around. I remember getting in the car afterwards with my folks, and I said, I want to come home. And my dad said, no, you don't. You need to stay here. You need to finish this out at least for the semester. And then I won the starting job on the freshman team, and things got better. And even during the spring ball, Coach Vince Gibson was our head coach. I had worked real hard with one of the assistant coaches on my throwing motions and accuracy. And Coach Gibson walked by me one day and he said, I guess we're going to leave you at quarterback. And I said, really? Where was I going? And he said, well, we've been talking about moving you to free safety, but we're going to leave you at quarterback. And I'm thinking to myself, if they'd have moved me to free safety, I was going back home.
Back to Ottawa.
Play 3 sports. So
right.
It just, one thing led to another. It just all worked out. I thank God for everything that has happened to me, because I certainly did think it would happen and probably didn't deserve to have it happen.
You ended up, you ascended to the starting position at quarterback and had a junior year that placed you as a guy that's in the conversation as an NFL prospect. But then, Steve, you had some injury, the first problems with your neck your senior year, which held you back to a point that now maybe you weren't going to be. There was questions about you being an NFL prospect or maybe being a guy that would have a chance to be drafted and get that opportunity.
Right. Yeah. The neck problem was something that developed my senior year, and I missed some time and was in and out of games with stingers down my right arm. And as I said, I really don't know why the Patriots decided to take a shot on me. They flew me back to Boston, and I saw one of their doctors who ran some tests on my neck. And to be honest with you, he called me in his office at the end, and he said, I think what you have, you might want to not continue your football career. It could be dangerous.
Oh, wow.
And I went back, and Coach Fairbanks brought me in his office. He said, how'd it go? I said, it went great. I wasn't going to tell him. I figured the doctor would tell him anyway. So I said, it went great. I'm real happy. I'm ready to play football. And I went home, and they drafted me, and I came in with 3 veteran quarterbacks on the roster, and you're only going to keep 2 quarterbacks. Dick Shiner was an older veteran. He retired during training camp. Jim Plunkett got hurt in the last preseason game, and suddenly I became the backup to Neil Graff. And I fooled them for 16 years until they finally figured out they made a mistake.
That's right. Stayed enough under the radar screen.
Exactly.
Exactly. And, really, that was a kind of a crossroads opportunity for you to come back. And I read where you came back and it was kind of a clandestine, got you into Foxborough and had a chance, Bucko Kilroy had a chance to evaluate, get involved in the evaluation, the medical clearance and so forth. In the days of the internet, it wouldn't have been so clandestine. Who's that quarterback that just came into town? It would have been all over the papers. But at that time, you could sneak in and out, Steve, as you did.
You could do a lot of things that people don't know, wouldn't know about today, but we won't go that way.
Exactly. Well, they checked you out, and you mentioned we're going to obviously talk a lot about Chuck Fairbanks and the opportunity to play for him. Chuck, of course, came from great success at Oklahoma, Kansas State, familiarity in a couple of ways. One, being in the same conference in the Big Eight, and also familiarity in the offensive philosophy. He was an option guy. You had experience running the ball, high school, college, etc. So that was certainly played in nicely.
It did. It suited my skills. I was a pretty good runner. It was a survival instinct I developed at K-State.
Running for your life?
Yeah, running for my life. And, I was hoping just to hang around during training camp and maybe somebody take a shot on me when they cut me or go to Canada and maybe play for a few years. But as I said, they kept me as the backup to Plunkett. And backup to Neil Graff. Neil Graff played 4 or 5 games and didn't play well. They put me in against the Jets down at Shea Stadium late in the game in a blowout. And I threw a touchdown pass to Russ Francis, and the next day they activated Plunkett, cut Graff, and suddenly I became the backup to Heisman Trophy winner. And 2 weeks later, he hurt himself again, and I was starting in the NFL. And who would ever figured it?
All of a sudden, there you
are. Not
are.
me, that's for sure.
You would have been the last guy on that line. Ended up starting 7 of the last 8 games that year. You played in 13 of the 14. Your memories about your first win out in San Diego, anything immediately come to mind when you think about that game? You had a solid game to get that first of what was many wins in a Patriots uniform.
We had a good game out there. I don't recall a heck of a lot of it. I do recall that Jets game that I went into. I remember standing on the sideline during the national anthem, and I looked across the field, and there was Joe Namath on the sidelines, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm on the same field with Joe Namath. This is unbelievable. And then, throwing the first touchdown pass of my career to Russ Francis was pretty special. And then the rest of my rookie year is kind of a blur. There was a lot of learning that had to take place. I wasn't a great thrower of the ball, like I mentioned earlier, so I was running around doing things that I was comfortable with. And fortunately, Coach Fairbanks didn't mind that. It helped work things out. Gave me time. My running ability bought me time to learn the passing game of the NFL. And I'm very proud that I could switch from a runner to a passer later in my career. A lot of guys had trouble with that transition.
Indeed, that you adapted to survive. Big part of your story, no doubt. And
yep.
The Patriots story, and for members of at least one generation, I'd say one generation plus, they think of the Patriots as what they are now: marquee, flagship franchise, 9 Super Bowls, 6 Super Bowl championships. But actually, when you look back to the beginnings of your career and what we're going to talk about now, which was the ascent of the Patriots, 1976, this was all very much new territory for the Patriots to be mentioned among the NFL elite. But 3 outstanding drafts will take care of that, Steve. And
yep.
The 1976 season proved to be a very, very special one. And I'm sure you've got some fond memories of that. And if you give us a little bit of perspective of what it was like before we talk about some of the specifics, but what it was like going into that season. Was there a feeling that we're about to take a step forward here and people are going to take notice of us?
Well, I think we all realized we had a really good draft, and we're getting some talented guys in, but draft picks, you're not sure how soon they're going to contribute, how quickly they're going to be a part of the process. I remember giving a couple of talks to different groups back home during the off season, and we started the season playing 4 playoff teams from 1975. And I told people if we could win one of them and get by that, we might be okay. And what we wound up doing was actually winning 3 out of 4 of those games. And we were off to the races. We were doing things we didn't know we were supposed to do. And we had a great bunch of young guys with some older veterans to give us leadership. And it was just a fun year to be a Patriot football player.
That gauntlet that you mentioned, and I had to go back and check, I remembered a little bit, but you opened the season, you had a loss to the Colts. But this is the NFL elite. This is the blue bloods of the NFL, let alone the AFC. Week 2, you defeat Miami, you throw 3 touchdown passes, no picks. Pittsburgh, the defending Super Bowl champions, that game, you come back from down 11 in Three Rivers Stadium to beat the Steelers. That in itself caused people around the NFL it was kind of like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Steve, who are these guys?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a really neat game to be playing the reigning Super Bowl champions. Actually, I still have, after the game, Art Rooney, who was friendly with Billy Sullivan, they were both Irish guys. Art Rooney smoked these really big cigars, and he gave one to Mr. Sullivan after the game as kind of a good luck with the rest of your year kind of thing. Yep. And Mr. Sullivan gave that cigar to me as I was combing my hair, getting dressed, and I still have that in my office here at home, up on top of a picture. That's how special that game was.
Wow. Still haven't smoked it. It's vintage.
No, it's a keeper right there.
Absolutely. That's a great memento. Red Auerbach would have smoked it a long time ago, but that's,
sure.
Yeah, indeed. And then, of course, fateful, as we would say at this point in the proceedings of if this was a play, the harbinger of things to come, the following week, after knocking off Miami and Pittsburgh, the Oakland Raiders visit Foxborough. And they went home, I think, a little bit battered and embarrassed and bloodied by the Patriots. 48-14. You threw for 3 and you ran for 2 in that game. Doesn't get much better than that. Not just from the personal, obviously personally your contribution, but the fact that you really dominated that Raider team, and which would turn out to be their only regular season loss of the year.
Right. Yep. Actually, they only lost that year. They wound up winning the Super Bowl. So
that's right. Overall, yep.
That was a huge win. And then, we kind of had a letdown the next week against Detroit. And they beat us in Detroit, which shouldn't have happened. But we got it back on track. But to win 3 of those first 4 was really pretty special for us. And I think that's when we all realized that we had a pretty good team, and everybody better watch out for us because we were going to do some damage.
Got to ask you about one play in that game, which has become the stuff of legend. I guess as a quarterback, you can sometimes keep the team, even in the huddle, on a need-to-know basis. There was a bootleg call that you made in that game where not everybody needed to know what you were going to do.
No, that happened. I did that a number of times throughout my career. We ran the ball so well that people were always trying to cheat to beat the running backs to the hole. And I always knew that if I was going to run the bootleg off of one of those sweeps, that if I told the lineman what I was doing, they would probably block a little differently because they knew that we weren't really trying to get yards on the strong side. So the only person I would tell was usually the wide receiver on the weak side, and just he ran off his guy and then started blocking him, and I would bootleg it around there.
Right.
I just hoped that everybody was chasing the supposed to be ball carrier, but it was one of the plays that people remember me by. It was the old bootleg.
It did work well that day and worked well many days during the course of your career, and had a 100-yard game. Jets, the big stage, Monday Night Football. What do you remember about Grogan's heroes. Not Hogan's heroes, but they became Grogan's heroes were the cult following of fans down at Schaefer Stadium in Foxborough at that time.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I had never even thought about how that would be worded differently than the TV show, but it was pretty cool. And there were a lot of fans that were making T-shirts up and doing various things like that for Grogan's Heroes. It was kind of a neat thing for a second-year guy in the league that probably shouldn't have been there, but it was really nice.
And you mentioned that we'll get to the season and how the rest of that season played out, but probably a good time to ask this question. Mention about New England and being transplanted from relatively small town, Middle America, right in the heart of Middle America. You can't get any more than Kansas. The adjustment to coming to Boston and somewhat demanding Boston sports fans, they can be rough at times. They love when they're on your side, but sometimes they can be a little bit harsh. What about your adjustment to culturally coming here, and also to the fans and the fandom that was following the Patriots at the time?
Culturally, it was a little different. The traffic was a whole lot heavier than we had in Manhattan, Kansas, where I went to college, or even Ottawa, where I grew up.
Right.
That took some getting used to. My roommate my first 2 years was Mike Patrick, our punter, and he was from Mississippi. So we were both kind of small town guys, small state guys. We rented a house in Braintree our first year, and had to fight the traffic on 128 and 95 every day. And so the second year we found a place in Sherburne, which was a little farther away, but the traffic on the back roads wasn't as bad. I guess the funniest story I can tell about the cultural change, back here in Kansas, when people drive by each other, they wave. That's natural. They're coming the other way, you wave, they wave. And if you go to the grocery store and you need some help, you just ask the person next to you. Well, I found out in my rookie year that you don't talk to people in the grocery store. They're getting what they want to get, and they're not going to help you. And I finally figured out if they realized that I was serious, that I wasn't just trying to be a jerk, and that they would be very helpful. But you had to break that barrier down first, which you didn't have to do in the Midwest. But once you broke the barrier down, they could be just as friendly as anybody out here.
That's a great observation. Myself, having grown up and spent my entire life here in Greater Boston, when I go to the Midwest, I'm always amazed at how friendly people are. Big smile, friendly, and it's always like, is he trying to put something over on me? You're always a little suspicious.
That's the New England mentality right there.
Exactly. I get, stay out of the frozen foods. Leave me alone,
There you go.
The grocery store. But that year, just to put it in perspective, the Patriots, obviously the ascent of the Patriots, very physical style team, most ever wins. You finished the regular season 11-3. You personally, 12 rushing touchdowns, and in that final game, you set the all-time NFL rushing record for touchdowns for a quarterback. It was held by Tobin Rote and Johnny Lujack. That's how far back. Since broken by, I believe, Cam Newton. It took a long time for Cam Newton to break that record. That one stood for a while, Steve.
He broke it, and there's about 7 or 8 other guys that are going to break his record. So
there's a lot of candidates.
Changing back to a running quarterback game, which is kind of neat.
Yep.
I enjoy watching that.
It absolutely. I was going to say, certainly relatable for you. And the first, once again, perspective, the first winning season for the Patriots since 1966, first playoff season since their one and only playoff season to that point had been 1963. And wouldn't you know it, your playoff opponent was the Oakland Raiders, and you were going to be going on the road to play the Raiders at the infamous atmosphere of the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. And your thoughts coming in, we talked about this about 10 years ago when I was doing the most memorable games in Patriots history, but what do you remember as far as the tone, Coach Fairbanks, and the fact that you had success against them in Foxborough. Now you were going cross country, and it was an elimination. It was a one and done situation to move on.
I think we were very confident in our ability. We had such a great season. We ran the ball extremely well with that team. Our defense played well. We got there for the workout the day before the game, and we realized that apparently Al Davis had informed his grounds crew not to cut the grass, and they had watered it to slow the field down, to slow us down. And they were trying everything. And, we were right in the game the whole way. We made a couple of mistakes that hurt us, and then we got the bad call on the roughing the passer to Ray Hamilton. And had that been a different call on that play, we probably would have been the first Patriot team to go to the Super Bowl, because the opponents that the Raiders played, Pittsburgh, they were all banged up, only had one running back. And Minnesota was in the Super Bowl, and they never beat anybody in the Super Bowl. So
still haven't.
They still haven't. So it could have been a great year. Could have, should have, would have, but it wasn't meant to be.
Team that broke 43 records that year and turned around nice symmetric from 3-11 to 11-3. You mentioned the rushing attack, absolutely dominant. And going back, and I had a chance to look at the films relative to that game. Brace yourself. We had Phil Villipiano on the program recently. So,
did you?
so this is giving us both sides of the aisle, if you will, having the chance to talk to you.
It's a whole lot different than mine.
It indeed. But you watch the film of that game, and once again, for younger followers of the games people play that need a history lesson here, the hitting level, in that game, the physicality in that game. Not only would they be throwing flags today, Steve, I think there would have been arrests.
That's highly possible. It was vicious. Russ Francis, our great tight end, Villapiano threw an elbow at Russ's head. It went through his face mask and broke his nose. He had blood coming out everywhere. And he went to the sidelines for treatment. And I think it was Steve Nelson and Steve Zabel, two of our linebackers, started screaming at him about coming out of the game just because he had a bloody nose.
Get in there.
They grabbed some cotton and stuck it up in there and got him back on the field. And another great story, Russ used to go back to Hawaii, where he grew up most of his time. And, of course, he was a pilot. And he came back to minicamp the year after the playoff loss to the Raiders. And he said he ran into Villapiano in Hawaii while he was over there vacationing, and they had a beer and shook hands and made amends. And Russ invited Phil and his wife to take a sightseeing tour in his airplane the next day. Russ said he flew him over Pearl Harbor, he flew him over Diamond Head, had him all over, and he got over I don't know where it was, an active volcano in one of the islands, and he tipped the plane to the side and reached across and tried to push the door open and said, "Get out of the plane, you son of a gun." And he said Villapiano left fingerprints in the dashboard. His wife in the back was scratching Russ's back. He finally tipped the plane back up. He said, "We're even."
That's right. Uncle admitted.
Yep.
That's such a great story. Phil was it alluded to that, and it just the circumstances of the game. Phil claims that the grappling and the sparring, for lack of a better term, between Villipiano and Francis was so bad that the officials finally said, "Hey, we're not throwing any more flags on you. You guys are on your own." And as it turns out, exactly what happened with that fateful play with Villipiano, literally tackling Francis with no call at the end of the game, which would have gotten the first down.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep.
I had heard that about the officials before, but I couldn't verify it.
Yep. You guys were up 21-10 after the third quarter, and then, the Raiders coming back and got the game to 21-17. Also, one of those the plays that you come back to on the cadence, the opportunity where you were looking to get the Raiders to jump at the end of the game, and you tried to switch the cadence, and well, you can fill in the blanks there, but it turns out it kind of went the other way for you guys.
Yeah, I think I made a big mistake on trying to do that. The guys were all keyed up. They were ready to come off the ball and go, and I tried to get cute and get the Raiders to jump off sides, and that was a big mistake on my part. We jumped and moved it back 5 yards and didn't make the first down. I think we had to wind up kicking a field goal, if I remember right. But I'll take the blame for that one.
Interesting to note there also, and once again, for the younger fans of the games people play, you were entrusted to call your own plays for the most part in your career, correct?
Starting with Ron Earhart, when he took over for Fairbanks, he let me call my own plays for 2 years.
Yep.
And then they took the responsibility back the third year, and we went 2-14, and they all got fired. And then Raymond Berry, when I went in for an injured Eason in '85, allowed me to call my plays. And the following year, he allowed me to call them for Tony or whichever quarterback was on the field. And I did that for 3 years. And then they decided the coaches need to do that. And I think we went 9-6, and they all got fired. And that was the last time I called the plays.
That was the last time. But that was a phenomenon, once again, that I think that football fans today would be amazed. Everything is so automated, but
it was just so much help to walk in the huddle and on 3rd and 3, I could look at John Hanna or Pete Brock or one of the offensive linemen who knew what the defensive line was doing. I'd say, we need 3 yards. What do you guys recommend? And they'd give me a play. And if they gave me a play, they knew they better make it work. So huge advantage. I could look at Stanley Morgan and say, can you get the in route or can you get the corner route yet? And he'd go, no, not yet. Let me set him up. Later in the game, he'd walk in the huddle. He'd say that corner route's ready to go whenever you need it. Coaches couldn't get that feedback that I was getting in the huddle. So It was a knack I had and something I really enjoyed doing.
Yeah. And once again, only the players know that, that you can talk to your receiver, say, hey, that corner's ready to bite. I can go hook and I can go deep, that type of thing,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, the rest was history. And for about, I guess, 25 years, if you were a Patriots fan, your memories of that particular, the Ray Hamilton, everybody, this is like the Zapruder film of football, Steve, when you think about the perspective. But your perspective on that play, once again, 57 seconds left. And the Raiders, look at the drive, is about to stall. They're at the 27-yard line of the Patriots at the time, and then the call is made. But did you have a good look at it from the sideline? Was it you at the time? Were you as astounded as maybe when you went back and looked at the film and say, "Man, that was a horrible call"?
I think we all thought it was a horrible call initially.
Right.
And then when you go back and look at it, even today, the rules have changed from those days. Today, it definitely probably would have been a call because his arm went across Stabler's chest near the head. Okay, you call that today, but back in those days, golly, you used to get hammered all the time after you threw the ball or as you were throwing the ball. It didn't matter whether it was high, low, or in between. They never called the roughing the passer. Yeah. So that's what made it even more disappointing.
Your memories of what is going to be some, I would suspect, some maybe the most bitter of your career of any one game, of the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of that game, and what that was like for you and for a very, as you mentioned, a very close-knit group that you had that year.
Yeah, it was tough to take, and actually, I think a lot of people had a hard time taking it. I know the officials, as they left the locker room, had to have a police escort. And I know that because the back judge happened to be the father of my backup at Kansas State. So I knew him pretty well.
Oh, really?
We
Wow.
don't talk before the game. We never talked after the game. I saw him come out of the locker room, and I started over just to say hi, ask how his son was doing. And I got surrounded by 3 cops before I could even get close to him. They thought I was going after him.
They just assumed the worst.
Yeah, he finally came over. And he saw what was happening. He came over, we had a chat. But it just was one of those games that the officials had a hand in, and they shouldn't have had a hand in it, in our opinion.
Yeah,
The Raiders will argue with you all day about it, but
yeah, no, it absolutely what might have been. But as far as the transformation, if you will, to maybe the very earliest days of the seeds being planted for Patriot Nation and what's happened the last 20 years, you did have quite a reception at Logan Airport. It made me think back to some of the other receptions that Boston sports history, the Red Sox coming back from their big road trip in '67. But your memories about that must have really shocked you guys.
Well, that was the craziest thing. We got back to Logan Airport and there were people in the terminal, and then we were running away from people in the parking garage trying to get out of there. It was, geez, it had to be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and there were people everywhere to greet us, and it was kind of a neat deal that they would show up like that. But we also thought that there would be other chances, and those other chances just never came along until '85, and by then a lot of those great players were gone.
Following that, your record as a starter, once again, just a testament to your prowess. 41-20, 30-17, 41-20, 76-79. You were an Iron Man. You started every game. You had your best season statistically, 1979, with almost 3,300 yards, and led the NFL in touchdown passes with 28. You put up some big numbers that year. You mentioned about adapting the way that you did, and that 78, it was a year in between, but then 1978, Ground Chuck was back and setting records again with your running attack and what you provided in the passing attack and your weapons to get back to the playoffs. But once again, to a generation that only knows the Patriots as the Patriots of dominance, strange things happen in Patriot history. And I think that's...
And people have written a lot of books about those things.
Exactly. That's like Hollywood Babylon, Steve. But the way that 78 season came down, I mean, you're on your way to winning the AFC East, and then there was a slight controversy involving the head coach. I mean, you as the quarterback of that team, your memories about that. When did you first find out about what was going on in the midst of this great run, playoff run, maybe redemption from 1976, and then all of a sudden you would say, oh, by the way, there's an issue with our head coach here?
Yeah, we were down in Miami, and there were rumors that started around in the hotel, as I recall, that Chuck Fairbanks was leading the team to go to Colorado and coach. And then they called us down for a team meeting late in the afternoon. It was a night game, and they called us down and informed us that Coach Fairbanks had been relieved of his duties right before a big game, week before the playoffs, 2 weeks before, whatever it was. And then we went to the stadium, and we had 2 co-head coaches that night, Ron Earhart and Hank Bulla, and they each gave their own pep talk before the game, and it was just a really strange thing. You know, we had enough trouble beating Miami in Miami for years and years and years that we didn't need that to happen, number one. And number two, we really didn't need Chuck to leave. He was a really good coach, had some great assistants, and really was the guy that could have taken us back to the glory that we were looking for. But he had some run-ins and different opinions of the Sullivans that they had in Colorado, and then got out of coaching eventually.
And actually, once again, only the Patriots, we could say, for that time period, he was actually brought back to coach the playoff game
Playoff.
against
Yeah.
the Bum and Earl. The Bum and Earl show came to town with the Oilers, and of course on New Year's, once the symmetry, Happy New Year, New Year's Eve, Fairbanks gets reinstated to coach what became the first ever home playoff game for the Patriots. And how
Right.
bizarre was that for you? All of a sudden, meet the like the Who, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. He's back.
It was strange. It was really strange. And one more strange thing that only happened in New England, the week before the Miami game, we clinched the division title against, I can't remember who it was,
San
but
Diego.
the crowd, who was it?
Was it San Diego?
It might have been.
Yep.
It might have been. But anyway, the crowd stormed the field. Somebody stepped on Harold Jackson's foot and broke his toe. So he was kind of limping around for the game in Miami and the playoff game. But the real thing was they tore down the metal goalposts, carried them out of the stadium, down Route 1, and ran into a power line and got electrocuted and sued the Patriots because they shouldn't have let them out with the goalpost. Now, where does that happen? Anywhere but New England.
I was going to say only in New England.
Yeah.
And it really just tarnished a great run. You had 5 in a row down the stretch, 7 in a row at one point that year, rallying back. I got to bring up, see if you remember this one game. I was looking at the tape. If this maybe stands as, if you remember this game, as maybe your best as far as comeback, but the game against San Diego, you brought him 74 yards to score the winning touchdown, if you recall that game. But I watched the drive, and it was absolutely brilliant in terms of your playmaking ability on that drive. Was amazing.
Is that right?
Yep. Honestly, you'll take my word for it.
I'll try to find that and watch it tonight.
Find that one on YouTube. And another big one against Oakland that year, too. You came back and nipped those Raiders, and a late drive against Buffalo. And actually, unfortunately, in that game, the New Year's Eve in the playoff, you actually missed some time with a knee injury in that game.
Yeah.
Yep.
I started having trouble with my left knee, I think, before the playoff game, and thought I could get through it. I couldn't make it through, so they had to pull me out, and I had surgery a couple weeks later.
Only NFL team with 4 rushers, 500-plus yards, and you were one of them from the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Just amazing in terms of being able to ground it and pound it, and good chance for us to address that offensive line that you played behind for most of your career. How about that? Was there a better left side? Maybe the Raiders would dispute it when they'd say Upshaw and Shell, but for your money, would you take Hannah and Gray, Steve?
Hannah and Gray I would take every day.
Sure.
They were quite a twosome, both from the South, and loved to play football, but John was the intense guy, and Leon he played intensely, but off the field he was like a giant baby. John scared the heck out of you every time he walked by you, but that was how he got ready to play. So those guys along in there, and then we had Bill Linkitis, and I think Pete Rock was sharing some time with him at center, and Sam Adams was a guard that didn't get as much recognition as he should have gotten, and I think it was Shelby Jordan playing the right tackle.
That's right. Yep, Shelby Jordan.
Shelby did a great job for us that year. We set the rushing record that was beaten last year by
The Ravens.
By the Ravens.
Yep.
They basically, the only way they broke it was because their quarterback ran like crazy. He had over 1,000 yards, didn't he? I think last year.
Lamar Jackson. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a record I never thought would be broken again because people weren't running the ball anymore. But now you have these quarterbacks coming back into the game that can run and throw and do it all, and coaches are letting them do it.
Yep.
I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, very much familiar to you and success that you had. One other, only the Patriots 1980. 10-6 was the final. People go look in the rec book and say, "Oh, they 10-6. They had a pretty good year. They missed the playoffs." But the way that you missed the playoffs, how many months during the off season were you guys talking to yourselves? You come into that last game, you got a 91% chance of making the playoffs. It's like a game show. 4 different scenarios, and you were in the playoffs. And once again, a very good Patriot team that year didn't get a chance to play in the postseason. And I saw a quote from you about that season and the type of year you were having. And once again, welcome to New England. I think it particularly hurts you. You had a knee injury after a great start that year. And as you said very dryly, it's really too bad because I got the fans back on my side again.
Who did we play? I don't even remember who we played.
Well, you won the final game against the Saints, and then it was about 4 different scenarios, and all you needed was one. Yeah. It all went the other. It was like you were at the table in Vegas, and it all went the other way.
Yeah, only the Patriots. And you try not to believe those things, but the more they happen, the more you really wondered what it was all about, you know?
Exactly. The curse. And one of your best games that year you remember the game at the Astrodome? Coming almost all the way back. You threw for almost 400 yards, 374 in that game, all the way to the final play with 35 seconds where you guys almost pulled it out. Any memories of that game? I went back and looked at that one also to get ready for you today.
Yeah, I think it was a Monday night game, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a battle down there in the dome. They had some really good players at the time, as did we, and they wound up winning it, what'd you say, by 3?
38-34, but you just went wild in the second half and bringing the Patriots all the way back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that was my luck sometimes, you know.
Mm-hmm. All the way back.
If I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck. But.
Exactly. B.B. King. There you go. Yeah. No luck at all. Also, one other game from that, once again, another one of those strange Patriots seasons, 7-2 to 8-6 to 10-6 to as we mentioned about missing the playoffs. You could have gone from number 1 seed or out of the playoffs. You ended up out of the playoffs. It's kind of like Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross, you know. New Cadillac, you know, steak knives, you know. There you go. You guys got the steak knives. But that game, talking about Monday Night Football, December 8th, 1980, and the Dolphins, Monday Night Football, and obviously it's a night that it transcended football because of what happened in New York City that night, but a game that a blocked field goal to overtime, and your memories of, you know, yet again, it had to be the Patriots playing that night with something that really kind of tore the world asunder with the cultural figure that John Lennon was.
Yeah, it was the anniversary of John Lennon's death.
40th anniversary, coming up December 8th.
Weeks ago. Yep. And part of what they sent was some film from the game with John Smith, our kicker, getting ready to go out and kick a field goal. And, of course, John was from England. With Lennon. So, you know, I don't remember knowing about that until the game was over with. And I wasn't a big Beatles fan, so I didn't realize what a big deal it was, but it was just a shame that anybody would shoot a celebrity like that. And it made you wonder what's wrong with the population when somebody would do that.
And as you mentioned, John Smith was a great find for the Patriots. And you got an English kicker named John that was kicking that had the field goal blocked at the end of the game. Once again, only the Patriots. That's our theme for today. Steve, just amazing. Just absolutely amazing.
Got about 20 more years of that kind of stuff until you can talk about all the great things they've been doing.
Indeed. Things started to catch up as they inevitably do for particularly at that position and particularly in that era, as we've talked about the physicality, multiple injury issues that you had to deal with, and once again, role reversal. You had a career where you saw it from all sides. 1983. Now the Patriots draft Tony Eason. He's a first-round pick, and situation for you was altered at that point. You had many battles, positional battles from your first year. Then you were established for a number of years, but now was a whole different type of battle for you later in your career with Tony Eason coming on the scene.
Yeah, Tony was the number one pick in that draft class that had, what was it, 6 quarterbacks in the first round.
Yep.
Tony had talent. He was very skilled at the position. He didn't have the burning desire to be great. I didn't think, but I got along well with him. And I got benched, he got benched, I got benched, he got hurt, I got hurt. We went back and forth for quite a while there. And then I stuck around and he moved on, and I haven't seen him hardly at all since.
One other game of note in Patriots history, NFL history. It's another one that put on the NFL Network at 2 in the morning, and they may be showing it. And, of course, that was the Snowball game on December 12th, 1982. You were right in the middle of that one and bringing John Smith down in a position to, under horrific conditions, to try to boot that field goal. Your memories of that game, once again, only the Patriots could have been playing Don Shula in that one.
Yeah, it was a game that was we felt like was going to turn on turnovers, and we were trying not to make any turnovers, and we kept giving the ball to Mosi Tutupu, who would have figured that a guy from Samoa that grew up in Hawaii and went to school in Southern California would be the best running back in the snow. But he was, and we just kept running him left and right, and late in the game we got down in there. What a lot of people don't realize is John had cleared out where he wanted to kick from, 7 yards from the ball, and the guy that was supposed to go down the line, and I was the one that Coach Meyer told me to run down there and tell him to go clear the line so that our blockers could have footing. He took it upon himself to swerve back, and he cleared out a place at 6 yards instead of 7 yards, which meant you got a kicker kickers are very superstitious. You got a kicker kicking a yard closer to the line of scrimmage than he's used to. Fortunately, John was a pretty hard-headed guy and didn't let things like that bother him, and he made the kick, and Shula was mad. And when we went back to Miami for the season ender down there, they had a snowplow in the end zone and a pile of snow, or maybe it was ice, I don't know what, but it was down there as a reminder that they felt like they got screwed.
It was Miami, so it was probably ice from somebody's drink that they
probably
they'd be ready to stir. But that's right. That was what I saw. Was you were actually the one. You made the call to the bullpen. You were able to get Mark Henderson to go down and get him and call in the left-hander, call in the snowplow.
There you go.
And I'm not going to speculate. I guess I will speculate on. We obviously football recently lost a lot of people in sports this year, a lot of iconic figures, but Don Shula passed away. Steve, I'm going to speculate that his last words might have been, "That freaking snowplow." I think that might have been right as he expired, because I don't think he ever got over that. There was rule changes. He was the rules committee guy the next year, and that was just another, once again, another event in Patriots history.
Well, he opened up a Shula's Steakhouse in Providence, probably 15 years ago, maybe. And I was invited along with a couple other guys, Steve Nelson, and we all went down there. And this had to have been 20 years after the snowplow game, and he still talked about it the whole night at dinner down there. So he definitely never forgot it.
Never got over that. Absolutely never got over it. And really, the final moment of note in your career was, again, a renaissance. Once again, as the Phoenix, you rose again, and we're talking about the 1985 season. And here you are, roughly a decade later. It's basically a whole different cast of characters, with just a couple of exceptions that were holdovers that had missed out. The Patriots, one of those missing ring teams, if you will, from the mid '70s. But a team that under Raymond Berry and kind of a new feeling, very slow start that year, and Tony Eason at 2-3 goes to the bench. Your thoughts when Raymond Berry all of a sudden said, "Hey there, old timer, put down the clipboard. You're my man again." And Raymond the guy that worked with Johnny Unitas, said, "Give me the veteran."
He sent me on the field, and he said, "I think your best chance of success is to call your own plays." And I started doing that. I think I fumbled the first snap.
Yes, I saw that.
But after that, we got things back on track, and I kind of, when Tony was in there, we threw the ball a lot more. I loved the running game, so when I went back in there, I was trying to get these guys to run the ball more, run a lot more play action passes, and it seemed to suit the players we had on that team that year. And we got on a roll and got a lot of confidence going. Our defense played extremely well that year, and I wrote it for 6 games, and then I got rolled up on and broke my leg, and Tony came back in and took us through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl, and we got to the Super Bowl finally. We don't like to remember a lot about it, but we got to the Super Bowl.
and once again, the way you got there, the gauntlet that you ran down to Miami, every game had a theme. It was you squished the fish, yep. and then it was actually it started with the Jets. It started with your most heated rival. You all on the road as a wild card. Never happened before. The Jets squished the fish in Miami, and then the revenge by the Bay. You were inactive, but there must have been, as one of the veteran members, face of the franchise, must have been particularly a good feeling to have vanquished the Raiders on that afternoon.
It was pretty special, and that was just a great game. We pretty much dominated them. We had forced turnovers on special teams and things like that kept us in the lead, and it was nice to beat them down there. And if you're writing a book about crazy things that happened with the Patriots, that's the day that Matt Millen hit Pat Sullivan, the general manager, punched him on the way into the locker room. Pat had to get stitches in his eye or his head or something. Yeah, I mean, this just doesn't happen to other teams. It just doesn't happen.
No, just another day at the office. The assistant,
absolutely,
part of the family of the owner. Yeah, he gets hit.
But winning that game in Miami, that was really special because we had won there in 20-some tries, and to go down there and dominate them the way we had dominated them, it was really cool.
Mention about the Super Bowl, and we won't say much about it, but Tony started slowly. You came in, actually had a pretty respectable game. You brought the Patriots to their only touchdown in the game. I just got to ask you, the operative question here is, of course, I mean, they're going to be talking, as long as they talk about football, about the 46 defense for that one season for the Bears.
Right. Yep.
What about your thoughts when you think back to facing that defense? You faced a lot of defenses over a lot of years, but was that one you'd put right in the pantheon?
Oh, there's no question that was the best one I ever saw.
It was. Yep.
They had a lot of talent. They had Hall of Famers across the board, and they just gave us a lot of trouble. Now, I will say this in defense of our coaches, we had planned on lining up in a 2 tight end offense and trying to balance out that 46, and Lynn Dawson blew his knee out on the first series of the game, and we didn't have another tight end, so our whole game plan had to change, and it just didn't work the same as what we thought it would do with 2 tight ends.
And I also saw a notice about the reference to when they looked at the film in the off season, as if you didn't feel bad enough, 31 dropbacks in that game, and there was 29 knockdowns in that game in terms of how hard. I mean, you got hit like Chuck Wepner in that. I mean, just, Ali and Wepner in that. In terms of the punishment that you took in that game from Dent and Singletary and the rest of them. Holy cow.
They were coming from all kinds of different directions. And just part of the game.
Oh, it certainly was then, particularly for that 1 year with the Bears. Your career, down the stretch of your career and coaching changes, once again, you saw multiple coaching changes. And actually, I know there's a story that I think you can relate that I once again the reference. You knew it was over, or you knew maybe it's close to being over at this point. A little bit of an exchange you had with Bruce Smith, which I thought
Yeah,
was very humorous, Steve.
yeah. Bruce was a young player in Buffalo and a really talented guy. And I was playing against him in Foxborough, and he got apparently knocked me down. Somebody knocked me down. I don't know if it was him or not, but he came over to me and extended his hand, and he said, "Are you okay, Mr. Grogan?" And I knew I was getting old when the younger players were calling me Mister. So it was very polite of him, but he could have just stayed away from me the rest of the game if he really wanted to be nice, but he didn't.
Exactly. And that was it was time at at 38 as you stepped aside from your career in the NFL, and not surprisingly, Steve, I saw where your primary interest at that time, getting out of football, was your hopes to get into coaching, but it proved to be difficult. 38 and what you were going to have to go through at that time in terms of climbing the ladder.
Yeah, I was, my dad coached, my brother coached, my uncle coached. I always planned on coaching, and I interviewed for a couple of college jobs and was told that I needed experience. I needed to go back to the high school level and get some experience. And at 38 years of age, I just didn't feel like I was ready to do that. And then I tried to interview with Bill Parcells, who had been with the Patriots when I was playing. He was our linebacker coach. And then when Pete Carroll got the job, I tried to get an interview with him, and they already had their own guys to do the job. So I decided that coaching wasn't in my future unless it was my kids, and that's pretty much the only coaching I ever got to do.
And your three boys, Tate, who was, I believe he was in the service for a while, was in the Air Force.
Yeah, he's still in the Air Force. He's a major.
Yep, a major in the Air Force. Tyler, who I just spoke to this afternoon, as point of full disclosure, he is running, just to give us the insight. There was a business opportunity that proved fortuitous a little over a quarter century ago that has linked your name with one of the iconic names of not just New England but all of sports, with the great champ, the heavyweight champion.
Now, Rocky Marciano's, the boxer's brother, Peter, owned a sporting good business for a number of years, and then he sold it to another gentleman from Marshfield who was having some problems and contacted me, and I figured it was 5 minutes from the house and the kids could work and learn, and so I decided to buy the business from him and see how it would go for 5 years, and that was 27 years ago, and we're still paying the bills and keeping the door open.
Indeed.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Being around coaches in that sporting goods field was kind of like coaching in its own way.
Indeed, and being very close to the Patriots. I heard one incident just to prove that it never goes away, particularly when you're talking Patriots, Raiders, and of course now it's become roughing the passer, tuck rule. Even you can be all the way over to Mexico City and you can be getting heckled, from what I understand. Is that true?
Yeah, that could happen. I went down there a couple of years ago for the NFL when the Patriots played the Raiders down there. And, boy, the Mexicans know a lot about the NFL, and they know a lot about the Raiders. And I used to have people come in the store after that tuck rule thing and say, "Boy, you must feel vindicated. Finally got the Raiders." And I said, "You know what? The fans are vindicated now, but we still got screwed out of a chance to possibly play in the Super Bowl. So I will never feel vindicated."
Absolutely. That's one that just doesn't go away.
No.
No, indeed. Unfortunately, you personified toughness, and I think one of the key points to make, and I think my full disclosure, because I always say because I'm old, Steve, I just actually hit a big number that I will shall remain nameless. But my dad was one of those old New England Giant fans, and he was a Giants fan, and I started watching the Giants and Fran talking in front of the TV.
Yeah.
So Phil Simms is, kind of my all-time quarterback. And I think of the parallels between the two of you. But really, one thing that really comes to mind, and I would say that I'll venture to say this is an invaluable asset for a quarterback, and that is to have a certain mentality that engenders and you interact with the team in such a way, particularly your offense, but particularly your offensive line. And there's so many quotes that I found about guys that you played with on the offensive line, let alone skill position guys, that talked about the great respect that they had for you. That's all about you, and kind of puts them in a position where maybe they're going to go the extra mile for that guy when he's back there, and that was certainly a big part of your career.
It's very kind of them to say nice things. I always felt like I was a football player just like them. I didn't want special treatment from anybody. If I had to get hit, I'd get hit. If I have to dive for a first down, I'll dive for a first down. If I have to take a hit hanging on the ball in the pocket, I'd do that because I knew those guys were giving it every ounce of their being to protect me, and I wanted to give everything I could to them. So it worked both ways.
No, indeed the case. Big part of your makeup, your temperament, your makeup, your demeanor, your leadership. I always think back. It's not often. I love to be able to ask these questions that I'd never get to ask. But are you familiar with the movie? One of my favorite sports movies is North Dallas 40. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
How much truth is there in the huddle when they're going down when they're making that drive at the end of the game and there's bickering in the huddle and Mac Davis, who just passed away, is settling them down? Was there a little bit more truth to that? Was that more truth than fiction in that movie?
It happens occasionally, or it happened occasionally to me. Not a lot. There were times when you had to kind of calm people down. And that's just the job of being a leader, I guess.
You have to have that calming effect.
You have to not be afraid to tell people something they may not want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. In a given situation, you've stayed close to Foxborough, obviously, and between Kansas and having time spent with your family there and your folks, but you were really a Patriots fan for a lot. I believe you had season tickets. You really enjoyed. I mean, what's it like as the face of the franchise for 16 years to see what has happened to the Patriots over the past 2 decades? It must be astounding to you.
Well, it was, and I think if you talk to any of the older players, the success they've had over there has trickled down to us. People want to be around the Patriots, and a lot of the young guys just don't have the time or inclination to get out with the public. So we picked up a lot of things over the years because of the fact that we were former Patriots, even though we didn't have the Super Bowl successes that a lot of those guys had. And then just, within the last 3 or 4 years, the kid wearing number 12 with the name of Brady, they've lost track of who I was. As the crowds got younger, people say, "Oh, that's Steve Grogan," and they'd go, "Who?" So it was time for me to get back out here and be around mom and dad with the time they have left. So that was special.
No, it's great that I know you cherish those moments. It's great that you have them and you have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And, to be able to savor that. Brady, just a few questions that are kind of wrapping up here that I've just been thinking about. Any doubt to Steve Grogan that Tom Brady is the best ever? That's a raging debate in football. People, the old timers, say other names factor in. Montana Unitas. How does Steve Grogan feel?
Brady, by a long shot, in my opinion, is the best ever.
Okay.
And to continue to play at age 43, that makes him even better. So I don't think there's any argument about that one.
Mm-hmm. Just to give the tail of the tape, Grogan, 5th-round pick, Brady is 6th, about the same size. He had Bledsoe. You had Plunkett ahead of you. You ended up marrying your college girlfriend, and he's got the supermodel. So, relatively equal.
Yeah, the only difference between us is really the women in our lives. So his wife's making twice as much as he's making, and
That's
my
right.
wife's spending twice as much as I'm making. So no, don't tell her I said that, please.
That's right. We'll strike that from the permanent record here, counselor. Yes,
Thank you.
exactly.
Thank
Can I
you.
approach the bench? Yeah, that's right. Spend it twice as much. That's good. That's very good. With the supermodel, he could be a stay-at-home dad when you're married to Giselle.
Absolutely.
That'd be no problem whatsoever. And talking about, interesting how this has all evolved over 2 decades, Steve. Talking about the renaissance now of the running quarterback, and the fact that you're enjoying that. But everybody thinks. I always say that the old saying, "There's nothing new under the sun." But you were really running RPO to coin the phrase. Now everybody talks about the RPO over the last decade or whatever. But a lot of what you did with the Patriots was RPO type of offensive theory.
Some of it was, yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's far more in today's game than it was during our games, but nothing really. Nobody's ever really come up with anything totally different in football. It just kind of recycles itself. It'll disappear for a while, and then somebody will bring it back and try it all over again. And if they have success, then everybody copies them, and that goes on for a while until somebody else recycles some new defense or some new offense, and then they start over again.
And the current quarterback for the Patriots, he's had his struggles recently. He started off well this year. Cam Newton, once again, there's a guy, it's like welcome back to Steve Grogan in terms of a guy that's a threat to run. You must, once again, you see some familiarity, I'm sure, if you're watching any of the Patriots games with Cam Newton and his ability to win with his legs.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a talented athlete, throws the ball well, runs well, and he's huge for a quarterback. So you take advantage of everybody's abilities, and that's what the Patriots tried to do early with him. I haven't seen him do it much lately, but he can still run when he needs to.
Indeed the case. And also just wanted to give due here just a couple of other points. We talked about your offensive line, and once again, kids, go back and take a look at the films. You had some great weapons during the height of your career. I mean, was there a better tight end? I mean, Howard Cosell gave him the all-world label early on, but Russ Francis was pretty much all-world when you consider the athletic specimen and what he brought to that position, Steve.
No question, it was Russ, great talent. And then we let him get away to the 49ers, and he had a pretty good career out there, and then came back to us for a couple of years late in the 80s. Stanley Morgan, Harold Jackson, and Irving Fryer were 3 of the best I played with. And Stanley, I think, is one of the best that ever played the game, and I'm still curious as to why he has not even been nominated for the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Averaging almost 20 yards a catch for 14 years or 15 years, however long he was there. You would think that would warrant at least some discussion about Hall of Fame material.
And one of those, really the tragic references in sports was a real tragedy. Another one of your targets, I went back and I saw you hook up with him a number of times. Darryl Stingley was just such a tragedy.
Darryl was a talented individual. He was a leader on the team. Always had a smile on his face. And to see him have his career ended like that in a preseason game that was hit that was not necessary, it's hard to live with that sometimes.
Yeah, really tough. Final words here as we wrap up. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the late Nick Cafardo, who was such a gentleman. I got to know him, interviewed him actually, that same Patriots book that I interviewed you. And
yeah, he was a great guy.
Was just a great guy. I got to know him around the press box at Fenway a little bit. but he did an article. I think this one's going to live as long as there's the internet. When people, if anybody's curious about Steve Grogan, he came up with something called GTM, the Grogan Toughness Meter, and he did a piece in the Globe in 2003, and I quote, 5 knee surgeries, a screw in his leg when the tip of the fibula snapped when you attempted to come back and practice, 2 ruptured discs in the neck, which you played with for a season and a half, broken left hand, which was no problem, just hand off with your right hand, no big deal, separated shoulders twice on each side. You had a reattachment of the tendon in your throwing shoulder, and a number of at least, 3 concussions, and somehow still standing. And once again, the game then, the game now, you must think you're looking at 7-on-7 when you watch the game today, Steve.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
It's all in the air right now. Different game than I played. As I said before, I love the running game. Offensive linemen love to block for the running game. But the fans love the high scores and the fast movements of the passing game. So I don't think you'll ever see the running game really come back a whole lot.
Not to that level. And generally, I wrap up with a quote, and I think you're going to like what I have to say here. And here it is. I've got actually 2 quotes from this same gentleman whose name has come up a couple of times here. And here was his comment about when Steve Grogan became, just to give us some perspective here, Steve Grogan becoming the starting quarterback of the Patriots back in 1975. I think I sensed we were really starting to go somewhere when Steve Grogan came in. He added that extra dimension we needed on offense, that little coolness that we're going to do it and we can make it happen. A quarterback needs to supply that to a team. That cool-headedness needs to be supplied to a team. And the other quote, same gentleman, said simply, toughest player that I ever played with. Both quotes attributed to John Hannah.
Yeah. That's very kind of John, because he's the same exact kind of player I am. He demanded respect in the locker room and in the huddle, and nobody ever practiced harder, played harder than John Hannah did. So that's quite a tribute coming from him.
Well, he was the face of the Patriots, and as he's mentioned, a lot of people don't remember. We're going to do our best to bring you back, Steve Grogan. We're doing all we can here today, and we really appreciate you coming on to join us. We just wish you were here live having, not a bowl of chowder, but a soup.
They've got some great soup there. I'm telling you, beef stew is really good too. So I've had that there.
Absolutely. We're going to be enjoying our post-game meal here, Steve, and we want to thank you. Thank you so much for the time, for joining us here today. We'll try to bail you out for that comment late about, with your wife. We'll try to bail you out as best we can.
Yeah, I was just kidding. I hope she knows that.
No, I think so. I think you're on solid ground there.
There you go.
But we really appreciate the time today here. You played well on the games people play, as we knew you would, with your leadership ability and your great NFL career, and having a chance to remember and celebrate it. All the best, Steve.
Been fun talking about all the old times. Don't get to do that much anymore, so thank you.
Okay.
Great
Francis open over the middle. Thanks, Steve.
You got it.
Okay. Steve Grogan, our guest here today on the games people play, and once again, we are close to his adopted home here, Mansfield, and I've got my Grogan Marciano Sporting Goods T-shirt on here, which is right down the street here on North Main Street. And once again, thanks as always to my executive producer, Andy Bernstein. We also have our head of security, Ralph Mondano, with us here today. We don't leave home without Ralph. He's our American Express head of security. Thank you to John Spezio and everybody here at Geno's. Geno's is a Mansfield institution, great food and spirits, established in 1981. Come down and try the chowder. Come down and try the award-winning soup. Come down and try the beef. Steve Grogan just recommended the beef stew. But great food, sports spirits, Keno. They got it all right here at Geno's at 407 to 411 North Main Street, our home away from home here today for the games people play. So, for Andy Bernstein and the rest of the Eyewitness News team, this is Bernie Corbett saying, play the game well, everyone.